The moment the trial bell rings, I do something no level 1 healer should ever do. I walk straight toward the monster everyone else is running from. Behind me, 40 summoned heroes are screaming. In front of me, a horned beast twice the size of a house is dragging its claws through the dirt, and somewhere in its shadow is a boy named Callum Reyes, the strongest of us, lying in a puddle of his own blood. I should be terrified. I should be running with everyone else. Instead, I'm sprinting toward the one person who's spent the last 3 weeks calling me useless. That's the kind of idiot I am. But to understand how I ended up here, you need to go back to the day I got dragged into another world and handed the worst starting class in the history of starting classes. My name is Dorian Ashe. 2 months ago, I was an ordinary university student failing an ordinary chemistry exam. Then a circle of light opened under my desk, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in a stone chamber with 39 strangers, all of us glowing, all of us terrified, while a king in golden robes told us we'd been summoned to save his kingdom from an army of demons. Cool premise, terrible execution. Because right after that speech, a glowing panel appeared in front of each of us, showing our class, our level, and our stats. Everyone else got warrior, mage, assassin, archer, dragon knight for some reason. I got healer, level 1. The room actually went quiet for a second. Then somebody laughed. That somebody was Callum Healer, he said, like the word tasted bad in his mouth. So the useless world even summoned a useless person. Everybody laughed that time. And I stood there in front of a king, in front of 39 future heroes, and felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. Here's the thing about the healer class in this world. Nobody wants it. Not because it's weak, because it's slow. A warrior levels up by hitting things. A mage levels up by burning things. A healer levels up by keeping people alive long enough for them to survive. Fights the healer isn't even allowed to join. Level 1 healer meant exactly one spell, a weak glow that closed small cuts. That was it. That was my entire arsenal against demons. They split us into training groups after that. Warriors went to the War Masters. Mages went to the Arcane Tower. And healers, there were 3 of us, got sent to the one instructor nobody else wanted to work with. They called her the Widow's Candle. I didn't know why yet. I was about to find out. Her real name was Vesper Marrow, and the first time I saw her, she was sitting cross-legged on top of a coffin in the middle of her classroom, eating an apple like it was the most normal thing in the world. 3 healers, she said, not even looking up. How exciting. I haven't broken 3 people at once in years. The other 2 healers, a nervous girl named Priya and a quiet boy named Tomas, went pale. I didn't understand the fear yet. I would. Vesper Marrow was maybe 25, with silver hair chopped short and uneven, eyes the color of dried blood, and a smile that never quite matched what she was saying. She wasn't scary because she looked scary. She was scary because she looked delighted by things that should have terrified anyone. Healing magic, she said, hopping off the coffin, is the most dangerous school of magic in existence. Everyone thinks it's soft. Everyone thinks it's support magic, kind magic. She grinned. They're all wrong, and it's going to get every one of you killed. Priya raised a shaking hand. Killed how? Because healing magic touches the boundary between life and death, Vesper said, suddenly inches from Priya's face. And that boundary bites back. That was day 1. By day 3, Priya had quit and transferred to alchemy. By day 5, Tomas stopped showing up entirely. Nobody blamed them. I stayed. Partly because I had nowhere else to go. Partly because something about the way Vesper talked about healing, like it was a weapon nobody had bothered to sharpen, made me curious instead of scared. Big mistake, some people would say later. They'd be wrong. It was the only smart decision I made that whole first month. Vesper's training methods were, to put it gently, insane. She didn't teach spells. She threw me into situations where dying was a very real possibility, and then screamed instructions at me while I tried not to die. Day 1 of actual training, she summoned a low-tier shadow wolf into the practice yard and told me to keep myself alive using nothing but my level 1 healing spell while it tried to eat me. This is child abuse, I said, backing away from a snarling wolf with too many teeth. This is education, she corrected, sitting on a fence, eating another apple. She always had an apple. I never figured out where they came from. I got bitten. A lot. My healing spell was too weak to outpace the damage, so I spent that entire session in a cycle of getting hurt, patching myself just enough to survive, and getting hurt again. By the end of it, I was on the ground, coated in dirt and blood, and Vesper was standing over me looking thoughtful. "Interesting," she said. "I got mauled," I said. "What's interesting?" "You didn't panic after the third bite," she said. "Most people panic by the second." I didn't have an answer for that. I was too busy trying to remember how lungs worked. That became the pattern. Every day, a new threat. Every day, me barely surviving it. Every day, Vesper watching not to see if I'd win, but to see how I reacted when I couldn't. Meanwhile, word was spreading through the academy about the other heroes. Callum was already being called a prodigy. His swordsmanship, combined with a fire affinity blade skill, put him at the top of every ranking board within the first month. He was handsome, confident, and increasingly convinced that he was the chosen one, destined to save this world single-handedly. He also never let a chance slip to remind me what I was. "Still playing nurse with the crazy lady?" he asked one evening, catching me limping back from training, soaked in wolf slobber and minor bruises. "She has a name," I said. "She has a nickname," Callum said. "The Widow's Candle. You know why they call her that?" I didn't. He clearly wanted me to ask, so out of spite, I didn't. He told me anyway. "Every healer she's trained before you either quit in the first week, or graduated and died in their first real battle within a month. She burns through students like a candle burns through wicks. That's why nobody wants her. That's why they gave her the rejects." He smiled, the kind of smile that thinks it's being generous. "You should quit before you become another one of her corpses." I remember standing there, exhausted, humiliated, aching in 6 different places, and something in me just refused to bend. "Not planning on it," I said. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Then he walked off to go get praised by 3 different instructors for his footwork. I want to tell you that moment lit some heroic fire in me, and I marched back to training with unstoppable confidence. It didn't. I marched back to my room and cried a little, because being told you're destined to die pathetic hits different when you already suspect it might be true. But then the system spoke. A soft chime, and a translucent panel blinked into existence in front of me. I stared at it. I had never seen this notification before. I tapped it, the way we'd been shown how to interact with our status screens, and a small description unfolded. I didn't understand most of those words, but I understood one thing clearly. I wasn't just a weak healer. I was a healer with something buried inside me that even the system was warning me about. I didn't tell Vesper right away. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me wanted to figure out what it meant on my own first. Or maybe some part of me was scared that if I told her, she'd finally look at me the way everyone else did, like a problem instead of a person. Turns out, I didn't need to tell her anything. 2 weeks later, during another one of her impossible training sessions, she stopped mid-lecture, walked over, grabbed my wrist, and went completely still. "How long have you had this?" she asked, voice suddenly flat and serious in a way I'd never heard from her. "Had what?" "Don't play stupid with me, Dorian." Her red eyes locked onto mine. "There's an origin current running under your skin. It's small, it's untrained, but it's there, and it's been growing every time I put you in danger." My stomach dropped. The system flagged something a couple weeks ago. Origin resonance. For the first time since I'd met her, Vesper looked genuinely surprised. Then, slowly, that unsettling grin crept back across her face. "Well," she said, "that changes everything." And that's when the real training started. Everything before that point, it turned out, had just been her testing whether I could survive fear. What came next was designed to test whether I could survive myself. She explained it plainly the next morning, sitting on top of that same coffin like some kind of throne. Normal healing magic borrows a small piece of the world's ambient life energy and uses it to speed up your body's own repair, she said. It's safe, because it's borrowed. Origin magic doesn't borrow, it transfers. Directly, life for life, force for force. Which means, theoretically, an origin healer strong enough could take a mortal wound and just refuse to die from it. Could take someone else's dying breath and give it back to them. Could, in the most extreme cases, push life into something that has none left. You're talking about resurrection, I said. I'm talking about the version of healing magic every kingdom on this continent has outlawed, because every single origin user in the last 200 years either lost control of it and killed themselves, or lost control of it and killed everyone around them. She hopped off the coffin. That's why they call me the Widow's Candle, by the way. Not because I burn through students. Her smile didn't move. but something behind her eyes did. Because I was married to one. He lost control during our wedding, trying to heal a stray cut on my hand. I watched what origin magic does when it goes wrong. The training yard went very quiet. So why? I said carefully. Are you about to teach me the same thing? Because unlike him, you have someone standing over your shoulder who already knows every way it can go wrong, she said. And because that beast currently gnawing at the world's throat isn't going to be beaten by fire swords and lightning bolts alone, someone needs to be able to pull people back from the edge of the grave. That someone is either going to be trained properly, or it's going to be a disaster waiting for the right funeral. I should have been scared. I was scared. But underneath the fear was something else. Something that had been missing since the day I got laughed at in front of a king. For the first time, someone was looking at what made me different and calling it a weapon instead of a joke. Teach me, I said. Vesper's grin widened into something almost proud. Wrong answer, she said. You don't ask to be taught origin magic. You survive it, and if you're lucky, some of it sticks. What followed was, without exaggeration, the worst month of my life. She cracked open every wall my body had. She'd wound me herself, small controlled cuts, and forced me to heal them using origin instead of my base spell, correcting my form when I flooded too much energy in at once and nearly gave myself a heart attack. She'd take me into the low-tier monster dens on the academy's edges and have me heal injured beasts mid-fight, forcing me to feel the exact moment a creature's life force slipped from stable to failing, so I'd learn to sense it before it happened instead of after. I threw up more times than I want to admit. I passed out twice. Once, I genuinely stopped breathing for 4 seconds, and Vesper, without even blinking, reached over and physically restarted my heart with a burst of origin energy so casual, it was like she was flicking a light switch. You could have warned me that was a risk, I gasped, lying on the ground afterward. Would you have kept going if I had? She asked. I thought about it. Probably. Then it wouldn't have mattered, she said, and tossed me an apple. But something started happening around week 3. My control got tighter. I stopped flooding too much energy into small wounds. I started sensing, almost instinctively, the exact difference between a wound that would heal on its own and one that needed real intervention. My status panel updated twice in 1 week. And then, on the last day of that month, everything I'd built got tested for real. The Academy ran quarterly trials, controlled battles against monsters 1 tier above what we'd normally face, meant to weed out anyone who couldn't handle real combat pressure before the war truly began. Every summoned hero had to participate, even healers, especially healers, since we'd be expected to keep people alive in exactly this kind of chaos on the actual battlefield. They paired me with Callum's group. Of course they did. Great, Callum said when he saw the assignment sheet, not even bothering to hide his disgust. The healer who almost killed himself learning forbidden magic gets to babysit my run. I don't need your permission to be here, I said. You'll need my permission to stay alive, he shot back. And honestly, at the time, I thought he might be right. The trial monster was a level 30 chimeric warden, a horned, armor-scaled beast 3 times the height of a man, built by the Academy's summoners, specifically to be nearly unkillable by a group our level. It was supposed to be a coordinated fight, ranged damage, tanking, healing support, textbook execution. It went wrong in about 11 seconds. Callum, arrogant as ever, charged in solo to try to land the opening blow himself, ignoring the formation the group had planned. The warden caught him with a tail swipe that sent him flying into the tree line hard enough to crack stone. By the time the rest of the group reached him, he wasn't moving right. His leg was bent at an angle legs don't bend. Blood was pooling fast. Everyone froze, including me, for exactly 1 second. Then the system flared in front of my eyes. 40 seconds. I didn't think. I ran. Everyone else was retreating, screaming for the trial instructors to intervene, because engaging the warden directly wasn't part of any healer's job description. Healers stayed back. Healers supported from range. Healers did not walk toward a level 30 monster with nothing but a barely controlled forbidden magic and a body that had passed out twice in the last month alone. I did it anyway. The warden turned toward me the second I got close enough, sensing easy prey, rearing back for a strike that would have ended me in 1 hit. And that's when I did something I hadn't fully tested yet. Something I'd only felt the shape of, in theory, during training. I pushed origin energy not into Callum, but into the ground beneath the warden's foot. a small, precise burst that accelerated the natural decay in an old root system beneath the soil, collapsing it just enough to throw the beast's balance off by half a second. Half a second was enough. I dove past its swinging claw, skidded to Callum's side, and slammed both hands onto his shattered leg. "Don't you dare die on me," I said, mostly to myself, and opened everything I had. Origin magic doesn't feel like the healing spell I started with. The healing spell was a gentle warmth. This was a current, violent, and immediate life force tearing out of me and slamming into him, forcing torn muscle back together, forcing bone to remember its shape, forcing his failing pulse back into rhythm through sheer, brutal insistence. I felt my own vision start to gray out at the edges. Vesper's voice echoed in my head from a dozen training sessions. "Control the flow, don't drown him, don't drown yourself." I clenched down on the current, shaping it instead of just releasing it, the way she'd beaten into me through weeks of pain. Callum's eyes snapped open. The warden's roar shook the trial ground behind us as the instructors finally moved in to subdue it, having realized too late that the situation had spiraled past a controlled exercise. Callum stared up at me, alive, whole, and completely speechless, for possibly the first time since I'd met him. "You," he started. "Don't," I said, shaking, barely holding myself upright. "Don't you dare say useless right now." He didn't say anything at all. He just kept staring, like he was looking at a completely different person than the one he'd been mocking for 2 months. That should have been the end of the crisis. It wasn't. Because Vesper had been watching the entire trial from the observation deck, and the moment she saw me use origin magic in an actual life-or-death combat scenario, tearing energy directly from my own reserves to save someone else without a single second of hesitation, something shifted in her expression that I'd never seen there before. Not amusement, not curiosity, recognition. She met me at the trial gates afterward, Apple nowhere in sight for the first time since I'd known her, which somehow scared me more than any monster had. "You weren't supposed to be able to do that yet," she said quietly. "Sorry?" I said, still shaking from the aftershock of pushing that much origin energy through an uncontrolled channel. "No," she said. "I mean it. Structurally, physically, you should not have had the reserves to stabilize a critical wound of that severity at your training level. I've watched origin healers train for years before attempting what you just did in a live trial. I didn't know what to say to that. There's something else going on with you," she continued, circling me slowly, studying me the way you'd study a puzzle that had just rearranged itself. "Your origin resonance isn't just awakening on a normal timeline. It's accelerating every time you're pushed past what should be your limit. Every crisis is cracking something open faster than any training regimen I've ever built." "Is that good?" I asked. "Or is that the part where I explode?" "Both are possible," she said, and for once, she didn't smile when she said it. That night, my status panel updated one more time, and this update was different from the others. Bigger, class evolution. I didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but the system had never used the word irreversible with me before, and that alone kept me up half the night. The Academy, meanwhile, could not stop talking about what happened at the trial. Word spread fast that the useless healer had pulled Callum Reyes back from the edge of death using magic nobody had seen a student wield in decades. Some heroes started looking at me differently. Others, including a few of Callum's old circle, started looking at me with something closer to suspicion, like origin magic itself was a threat just for existing near them. Callum sought me out 3 days later. I expected mockery. Instead, I got something I never saw coming. "I was wrong about you," he said, standing stiffly in the training yard doorway, like the words physically hurt to say. "I noticed," I said. "I've been the strongest person in every room since we got summoned," he continued. "I got used to it. I stopped thinking about what anyone below me on the ranking board could actually do." He looked away. "You should have let the instructors handle it. You could have died walking toward that thing." "You would have died if I hadn't," I said. He didn't argue with that. He just nodded, once, like he was filing the moment away somewhere he wouldn't forget it. Then he left without another word, and that was the closest thing to an apology I ever got out of him. I didn't have long to enjoy the small victory, though, because Vesper had already scheduled the next phase of training, and this one came with a warning label attached. "If your class is about to evolve," she told me, "we need to control exactly how and when that happens. An uncontrolled evolution under battlefield pressure could kill you the second it triggers. A controlled one, done right, in a setting I can manage." She trailed off, and that grin came back, sharper than before. could push you straight into S-rank potential. S-rank. The tier Callum was currently sitting at. The tier reserved for the handful of summoned heroes whose power output could shift an entire war. Nobody expected a level 1 healer to ever get close to that ceiling. Vesper clearly intended to prove every single one of them wrong. The method she chose to force the evolution was, predictably, terrifying. She arranged access to the Academy's sealed lower vault, a chamber used to safely contain a captured wraithbound revenant, a creature that existed in the space between living and dead, one of the few monsters on the continent whose very presence put origin-based life force under direct strain. "You want me to fight a thing that's already dead?" I said, staring down into the vault stairwell. "I want you to save something that's already dying," Vesper corrected. "There's a difference, and that difference is exactly what's going to crack you open the right way instead of the wrong one." Down in that vault, chained but still twitching with unnatural half-life, was a young apprentice mage the Academy had failed to save from a revenant encounter weeks earlier. Trapped between life and death, his body preserved but his life force fading in slow motion, considered a lost cause by every healer who'd examined him. "They kept him alive on maintenance spells," Vesper said, voice quiet for once. "Nobody could push him back over the line. Nobody had the origin capacity to try without killing themselves in the attempt." She looked at me. "Until now." I stared at that boy, barely older than me, trapped in that in-between state, and felt something harden in my chest. "Tell me what to do," I said. "You already know what to do," she said. "You've just never done it at this scale." I placed both hands on his chest and reached for that current inside me, the one that had been building, cracking, awakening for weeks. I let go of every wall I'd built to control it in small doses, and for the first time, I gave it everything. The room lit up gold. My own vision started to tunnel almost instantly, my knees buckling under the sheer weight of what I was moving, but I locked my focus the way Vesper had trained me, and pushed anyway, feeling his fading life force under my hands, feeling the exact thread of it about to snap, and I held it. I dragged it back from the edge with everything I had left. The boy's eyes opened, and my status panel exploded with light. I don't remember hitting the ground. I remember Vesper's voice, sharper and more alive than I'd ever heard it, shouting my name as everything went dark. I woke up 2 days later in the Academy infirmary, weak, drained, and utterly changed. Vesper was sitting beside my bed, an apple in one hand, and for the first time since I'd met her, something that looked suspiciously like relief on her face. "Welcome back, Sovereign," she said. "Please don't call me that," I said, my voice cracking. "Get used to it," she said. "By tomorrow, the entire Academy will be—" She wasn't exaggerating. The moment the assessment boards updated, showing a former level 1 healer now sitting at confirmed S-rank potential under a class nobody had seen in generations, the entire kingdom took notice. Instructors who'd never spoken to me suddenly wanted my attention. Heroes who'd laughed at me in that summoning chamber 2 months earlier started asking, quietly, if I remembered their names. Callum found me on the Academy rooftop that evening, staring out over torchlit training yards that used to make me feel like the smallest person in the world. "S-rank," he said, leaning on the railing beside me. "Guess the useless healer beat me to it after all." "Didn't beat anyone," I said. "Different class entirely." "Doesn't matter," he said. "Everyone's going to be talking about the healer who cracked the widow's candle before they talk about the swordsman who was born strong." He glanced at me, and for once, there wasn't a trace of mockery in it. "You should be proud of that." I should have been. Standing there, S-rank confirmed, the boy everyone had written off now holding a class so rare, the system itself hadn't seen it triggered in generations, I should have felt like I'd won. Instead, 3 days later, a royal messenger arrived at the Academy gates, and everything I thought I'd earned turned into something far more dangerous than I ever expected. Vesper met me before the messenger even reached the front hall, her expression tighter than I'd ever seen it. "They know," she said. "Know what?" "Origin Sovereign," she said. "It's not just rare because it's powerful, Dorian. It's rare because it's the exact class the Church outlawed 2 centuries ago, after the last person to hold it went mad from the strain and leveled half a province trying to bring back someone who was never meant to return." Her red eyes locked onto mine, dead serious. "The kingdom didn't just take notice of your power today. They took notice of what your power is capable of becoming." Behind her, the royal messenger unrolled a scroll bearing the king's seal and read a summons that made the entire hallway go silent. The healer everyone had called useless was being called before the throne. Not to be rewarded. To be judged. And somewhere in the shadows of that hallway, someone was already watching. Someone whose interest in the return of an origin sovereign had nothing to do with the war against the demons at all. The nightmare everyone thought I'd already survived hadn't even started yet. The throne room doors are taller than any door has a right to be, and I'm walking straight toward them with an escort of armored knights who won't look me in the eye. That's the part that scares me most. Not the knights, not the size of the doors, the way nobody will look at me. 2 days ago, I was the healer nobody wanted. Now I'm the healer everyone's afraid of. And apparently fear doesn't make people any friendlier. It just makes them quieter. Vesper walks beside me, Apple nowhere in sight, which by now I've learned is basically a warning siren wearing a person's skin. She hasn't said a word since we left the academy gates. That's not like her either. You could talk, I say. Anytime. Really. I'm saving it, she says. For what? For when it counts. Great. Just great. My mentor is rationing her sarcasm for the exact moment I'm about to be judged by a king, which means she thinks I'm going to need real ammunition, not banter. That thought sits in my stomach like a stone. The knights push the doors open, and the throne room swallows us whole. It's enormous. Marble floors polished so clean they throw back my own reflection. Walking beside me, pale and small. Banners the height of buildings hang from the ceiling, gold thread catching torchlight. And at the far end, raised on a dais that makes everyone below it look like an insect, sits the king. The same king who told 40 strangers 2 months ago that we'd been summoned to save his kingdom. He doesn't look welcoming today. Flanking him are 5 figures in white and silver robes. Hoods drawn low enough that I can only make out chins and mouths. Church inquisitors. I don't know their names yet. I know their posture, though. It's the posture of people who've already decided something, and are just waiting for the formality of hearing me speak before they act on it. My legs want to stop moving. I make them keep going anyway. The system flickers faintly at the edge of my vision, a small readout I've learned to mostly ignore. Thanks. Genuinely helpful. We stop at the base of the dais. Vesper drops into a bow that looks more like an insult than a courtesy. I copy her. Badly. Half a second too late. Dorian Ashe, the king says. His voice fills the room without him raising it, which is its own kind of terrifying. Do you know why you've been summoned here? I have a guess, I say, because lying to a king seemed like a worse idea than honesty, even nervous honesty. One of the hooded inquisitors steps forward before the king can respond. Her voice is dry, precise, the kind of voice that's read 1,000 reports and enjoyed exactly none of them. 2 days ago, she says, a level 1 healer manifested a class evolution into something called Origin Sovereign, a class banned by royal and church decree 200 years ago, a class with exactly 1 prior recorded holder in this kingdom's history. She pauses, letting that land like a dropped blade. That holder is remembered for one thing. He leveled half a province trying to raise the dead. The room goes colder. Not literally, it just feels that way. I didn't know any of that when it happened, I say. I was trying to save someone's life. That's it. That's the whole plan. Intentions, the Inquisitor says, are not the concern of this tribunal. Outcomes are. That's when Vesper finally speaks, and her voice cuts through the room like she's been holding it back on purpose, saving it, exactly like she said. Then let's discuss outcomes, she says, because I was there for both. I was there 200 years ago, when the last Origin Sovereign burned himself into legend and took an entire province down with him. And I was there 3 days ago, when this boy pulled a dying student back from the edge of the grave without hurting a single soul in the process. She takes one slow step forward. Those are 2 very different outcomes. I'd think that would matter to a tribunal built on outcomes. The Inquisitor's mouth tightens. You would know quite a lot about that history, Instructor Marrow, considering your husband's role in it. The room goes very, very quiet. I feel Vesper go rigid beside me. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to notice. My husband, she says, voice flat as a blade, wasn't the sovereign. He was a healer who tried to close a paper cut and lost control of a fraction of what this boy commands without breaking a sweat. If you want to talk about what happens when origin magic goes wrong, talk to me. I've lived inside that answer for 20 years. But don't stand there and pretend you understand it from a report filed by people who weren't even born yet. I didn't know that. Not the specifics. Not like this. Spoken out loud in a throne room in front of a king. Her husband hadn't been the sovereign. He'd just been unlucky. Untrained. A fraction of what I already had, and it still nearly destroyed her. That should have scared me more than it did. Instead, it made something click into place. She hadn't just been training a healer, she'd been trying to make sure nobody else's wedding day ended the way hers had. The king raises a hand, and the room falls silent again. Instantly, the way a room only does for someone who can end careers with a sentence. "Instructor Marrow," he says. "Your point is noted, but the church's concern is not history alone, it is precedent. An origin sovereign, however well-intentioned, represents a risk this kingdom cannot ignore in the middle of a war we're already struggling to win. With respect, Your Majesty," Vesper says, "you're currently losing that war. And you're seriously considering removing one of the few things that could actually turn it, because 200 years ago, one untrained, unsupervised, unloved man made a mistake nobody caught in time to stop." She lets that sit. "I caught this one, early. I trained him myself. I know exactly what he's capable of, because I built the walls that keep it from going wrong." One of the other inquisitors, an older man with a voice like gravel, finally speaks. "And if those walls fail, then I'll be the one standing closest when they do," Vesper says. "Which is more than anyone did for my husband. Nobody argues with that. Nobody can." I stand there in the silence that follows, feeling smaller than I have since the day I got laughed at in this exact kind of room. Except this time, the thing making me feel small isn't mockery. It's the weight of a woman risking her own name to protect mine. I open my mouth to say something, anything, and that's when the throne room doors open again behind us. Callum walks in like he owns the floor beneath his boots, which, given his ranking board position, he basically does. "Apologies for the interruption, Your Majesty," he says, dropping into a bow sharp enough to look rehearsed. "But I have testimony relevant to this tribunal." The king's eyebrows lift, just slightly. "The Academy's top-ranked hero. This should be interesting." "It will be," Callum says, and walks up beside me. Beside me, not behind me. That detail isn't lost on anyone in the room. 3 days ago, he says, I was dying. Not metaphorically. My leg was shattered, my pulse was failing, and every trained combatant in that trial group had already made the reasonable decision to fall back and let the instructors handle it. He glances at me. Dorian didn't make that decision. He ran directly at a level 30 monster with nothing but a healing spell nobody thought could matter, and he pulled me back from the edge of dying using the exact power you're currently deciding whether to fear. An impressive story, the gravel-voiced Inquisitor says. It doesn't erase the danger inherent to the class itself. No, Callum says. But it should mean something that the person holding that class chose to save a rival who spent 2 months mocking him, instead of walking away and letting nature take its course. He straightens. I've spent my whole life being told I'm the strongest hero summoned to this world. I believed it, I liked believing it, but strength isn't the only thing that wins a war. I watched a boy everyone called useless refuse to let someone else die, at the cost of nearly dying himself. If this kingdom punishes that instinct instead of protecting it, then this kingdom deserves to lose. The room doesn't just go quiet, it goes still. The kind of stillness that happens when someone says something too honest to argue with immediately. I stare at him. 2 months ago, this same person told me I should quit before I became one of Vesper's corpses. Now he's standing in a throne room, spending his own reputation on my behalf, in front of the king, in front of the church, in front of everyone. I don't say anything. I'm too busy trying not to do something embarrassing, like cry in front of a monarch. The king studies the two of us for a long moment. Then he looks past us, toward Vesper, and finally toward the hooded inquisitors, who exchange a glance I can't fully read. The tribunal will confer, the king says. They step aside, into a huddle of low voices and sharp whispers. I can't make out most of it. I catch fragments. Precedent, risk, necessity, war effort, and one word, repeated more than the others, in a tone I don't like at all. Containment. Vesper hears it too. Her jaw tightens. That's not a good word, I whisper. No, she says. It isn't. The huddle breaks. The gravel-voiced inquisitor steps forward again, and this time, when he speaks, it isn't to argue. The tribunal has reached a decision, he says. Every muscle in my body locks up at once. The boy will not be executed, he continues, and the relief that hits me is so sudden I nearly stumble. Nor will his class be forcibly suppressed, given the demonstrated risk of such a procedure and the ongoing need for combat-capable healers in this war. I want to breathe. I don't, not yet, because I can hear the shape of a however forming before he even says it. However, he says, right on cue, a class this dangerous cannot go unsupervised. The church will appoint a monitor, someone with the authority and the training to observe the sovereign's development, intervene if control is lost, and report directly to the tribunal on his progress. He looks at me directly for the first time since I walked in. You will not act alone in this. Not anymore. Vesper's hand closes around my wrist before I can respond. A small, silent warning. Don't argue. Not here. Not now. I swallow whatever protest was climbing up my throat. Understood, I say instead, because it's the only answer that doesn't get me executed on the spot. Good, the king says. Then let this tribunal formally record its judgment. The one called useless has become the one this kingdom watches most closely. He almost smiles. It doesn't reach his eyes. History has a strange sense of humor, doesn't it? I don't answer that. I don't think it was really a question. The Inquisitor turns toward the throne room's side entrance and gestures. Bring in the monitor, he says. I don't know what I expect. Someone older, maybe? Someone stern and gray and covered in ceremonial medals? The kind of person who looks like they've spent 30 years reading reports about people like me. That is not who walks through that door. She's young, younger than Vesper, maybe close to my own age, dressed in the same white and silver robes as the other Inquisitors, except hers are cut sharper, more precise, like even her clothing wasn't allowed room for softness. Her hair is pale, pulled back tight enough that not a single strand moves out of place. Her eyes are the color of frost on glass, and they land on me the instant she enters the room, and don't move. She doesn't look at Vesper. She doesn't look at Callum. She doesn't look at the king. She looks at me like I'm the only person standing in that entire throne room, and something about that focus makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Inquisitor Celine Cray, the gravel-voiced man says, she will serve as the sovereign's assigned monitor, effective immediately. Celine inclines her head, the smallest possible motion that could still technically be called a bow. I've read every report on origin resonance this church has on file, she says. Her voice is quiet, controlled. The kind of controlled that sounds like it took a lot of practice to sound that natural. I intend to make sure this one doesn't end the same way the last one did. Comforting, I mutter, before I can stop myself. The corner of her mouth twitches, not quite a smile. It wasn't meant to be comforting, it was meant to be true. Beside me, Vesper has gone very still again. The same stillness from earlier, except sharper now, more deliberate. I glance at her and catch something crossing her face for just a fraction of a second before she smooths it away. Recognition. The same look she gave me after the trial, except this time it isn't aimed at me. It's aimed at Celine. Have we met, Inquisitor? Vesper asks, voice pleasant in a way that doesn't match the tightness in her shoulders at all. No, Celine says, too quickly. I don't believe we have. Funny, Vesper says. You looked at me like we had. The temperature in the room seems to drop another degree, and this time it isn't the king causing it. Celine doesn't answer that. She turns back to the tribunal instead, like the conversation never happened. With the tribunal's permission, she says, I'll begin observation immediately. I'd like to see the sovereign demonstrate controlled use of origin magic under supervised conditions before the week is out. Granted, the gravel-voiced Inquisitor says, and just like that, my entire life gets rearranged again, for the second time in 3 days, by people who barely bothered to ask what I wanted. The tribunal dismisses us not long after that, with instructions for Celine to report to the academy within the day. Callum peels off toward his own quarters with a nod in my direction that somehow says more than any of his words did. Vesper and I walk out through those enormous doors together, back into the cooler air of the palace corridors, and for a long stretch neither of us says anything. Finally, I break the silence. You know her, I say. Don't try to tell me you don't. Vesper's jaw is tight. I don't know her. Vesper. I said I don't know her, she repeats, sharper this time. And there's something underneath the sharpness that sounds almost like fear, which is a word I never expected to associate with the woman who eats apples while sitting on a coffin. But I know that look. I've seen it before, a long time ago, and if I'm right about where I've seen it, then this church didn't send us a monitor. Then what did they send us? Vesper stops walking. She turns to look at me directly, red eyes serious in a way that makes my stomach drop before she even finishes the sentence. They sent us someone with her own reasons for wanting to understand exactly what happened to the last Origin sovereign, she says. And I don't think those reasons have anything to do with protecting this kingdom at all. Somewhere behind us, footsteps echo down the corridor, unhurried, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that belong to someone who already knows exactly where they're going. I glance over my shoulder. Celine stands at the far end of the hall, watching us go, that same frost glass stare fixed on me like she's already cataloging everything she's about to learn. She doesn't wave, she doesn't smile, she just watches, the way you watch something you've been waiting a very long time to find. And that's when I understand, with a cold certainty that settles somewhere deep in my chest, that whatever judgment I just survived in that throne room wasn't actually the dangerous part of today. The dangerous part just started walking beside me, wearing the church's colors, calling herself my monitor, and looking at me like she already knows exactly what I'm going to become, because she's spent years searching for someone who became it before.